fires us up so much about this thing is it hinders our ability to represent these buyers, and it also makes it so that some of these buyers are unrepresented.
Ben, floor time. Dude, I have a bunch of notes here. You can see them. I want to go over the lawsuit, the National Association of Realtors lawsuit. What we're going to cover is what the lawsuit entails, who was involved in it, how commissions work right now, today, or how they worked last week, or how we're kind of used to it, and how it can drastically affect buyers moving forward. So first of all,
can we also talk about if you hear your real estate agent say this in a listing presentation?
Yeah,
it might be a problem.
Without a doubt.
We'll finish there.
Yeah, we'll get there. I know exactly, dude.
If you can't tell, we're a little...
This fires me up. It fires Ben up. Yeah. My heart rate is elevated over the last couple of days. NAR, National Association of Realtors, Keller Williams, Remax, all these guys. Remax, I think, settled early, but basically what it comes down to is a bunch of sellers got together, class action lawsuit against National Association of Realtors for colluding or price fixing.
It's not class action yet.
It's not class action yet.
It could become class action through the appeals process.
Which the appeals process is going to take years.
Yes. But if you've been reading in the news, it's the Sitzer Burnett lawsuit.
Right. They lost for $1.78 billion, which is crazy. This was just a civil case. NAR is going to appeal this, and the appeals process, we have heard, could take years.
Mm-hmm. After 2 hours of rebuttal from the...
Right. 2 hours of deliberation.
Yeah. From the jury.
Yeah, it took the jury 2 hours to come back and say, we agree with the plaintiffs.
Yeah.
This was Burnett Sitzer, so involved in this was National Association, Remax, Keller Williams, Berkshire Hathaway. Anywhere, which owns a few of them, a few of the brokerages. And I guess they're going after a couple more after they won this one. They put in the paperwork to get it going on a couple more.
Why not? We won the first one.
Right. So how we're going to address this is going over how commissions work right now, or how we're accustomed to commissions working. And basically what happens is the seller pays the seller's representation. The seller pays the listing agent's brokerage, whatever they have negotiated with that realtor. Let's call it 5%.
Okay.
That listing agent can then pay the buyer's representation with that money, right? So technically, the seller is paying the listing agent is paying the buyer's agent when all is said and done.
Mm-hmm. Well, so realistically, right, the way that it's, if I sit down with a seller, I say, hey, I charge 5%, or my brokerage, requires me to charge 5%, whatever the conversation is. And then me as the listing agent get to delegate or delineate out of that 5% what I, as the listing agent, want to pay the buyer. That's how it's been, right?
Well, in your listing paperwork, in the exclusive right to sell document, it spells it out. You are being charged 5%, 6%, whatever that is. The next line, the very next line is, my brokerage is going to pay the buyer's representation. They're going to pay their brokerage this amount of that. If that stops, right? If we stop doing business that way, buyers are going to have to come up with the funds to pay their representation, right? We are talking anywhere from $5,000 to $20,000 that these buyers are going to have to come up with, all based on the sales price of the house. We are dealing with buyers all over the place right now that are struggling to just come up with a down payment. So, in my opinion, and I'm not the smartest dude in the room by far, I mean, this is going to make buying a house less attainable for the average American. Like, by a lot, dude. If you're struggling to come up with the down payment, how are you going to come up with another $10,000 to pay your representation? And if you're going to pay for good representation, it's going to be that much. If you're going to pay for a guy who can negotiate a deal for you and lead you through that transaction safely, securely, and with your best interest truly at heart, you're going to pay for it. And what are we doing making this harder on buyers? I thought that our goal with, different administrations, we don't need to dive into this, but dude, I thought our goal was to make the American dream attainable for Americans. It turns out that's not the case. And that's why it's firing me up so much, because I see in the future, I see only people with that kind of money being able to buy a house. It's already so hard for a buyer to buy a house. Why are we making it that much more difficult? Also, let's talk about the sellers who won't offer commission to the buyer's representation. What that's going to do for their buyer pool, right? Let's say I own a house for $500,000. I'm going to put it on the market and I am only paying my agent to sell my house. I'm not willing to pay for a buyer's broker to come in and deal with the buyer on this. I am legitimately cutting my buyer pool by how much, do you think? If I'm trying to sell my house for $500,000, I want the most eyeballs on that house and I want the most qualified eyeballs on that house. Mm-hmm. If you are not going to pay for the buyer's representation at the end of this, who's going to be looking at your house? Yeah. If it's going to cost them an extra $10,000. Also, we can dive into appraisals after this, dude. So what are appraisers going to think when they're like, oh, this house is selling for $15,000 more than this one down the street, but he's not offering any compensation to the buyer's broker? The buyer has to come up with that. So if appraisers are truly there to protect the buyer, then how is that going to come into play? Because I doubt the appraisers are going to be like, are going to actually look at that and say, well, now it's $30,000, that we have to come up with. I just think there's a lot of problems there.
Yeah, I think like you said, it's all about information. We just had an office meeting today, and we talked about informing our sellers and informing our buyers, and it coming down to us as the buyer's agent, hoping that these sellers agents are informing their sellers of the benefits of offering that outside commission. However, if they don't, right, me as a buyer's agent are going to, you probably as well, we're going to start having different conversations with our buyers and say, hey, here's our buyer's broker's agreement, which we are now requiring that all of our buyers sign. And we, as agents on a team, have decided that we work for 2.5% to represent our buyers. However, there might be sellers out there that are offering less than 2.5%, or in some cases 0.
Right.
So in that case, you are agreeing to pay Cal or I 2.5% to represent you.
Right.
If you can't afford that, it is our duty as real estate agents, as it sits today, November 2023, that we have to show every single buyer every single home that they want to see if we have an agreement to represent them.
Right.
So we will continue to show those properties, but you could be on the hook to pay up to 2.5% for our representation.
Right.
Right. It's a whole new conversation that has to come out.
And the buyer's brokerage agreement is something that you and I haven't put into place, or haven't made it mandatory that our buyers sign that. Mm-hmm. One, because I am a true believer in, if you don't like the way I'm representing you, we don't have to make this a contract. Mm-hmm. This can be a handshake deal. Mm-hmm. I'm going to show you houses. You're going to use me
Which
to buy that
realistically
house.
can be the same thing if they sign the buyer broker.
You're right, but it's another 2 pages that they have to sign that we have to go over. That honestly is a good thing to go over. I was against it, and the more I hear about this
Dude,
lawsuit,
we're fighting for the buyers, man, and that's
Right.
exactly what this thing says. What fires us
Exactly.
up so much about this thing is it hinders our ability to represent these buyers, and it also makes it so that some of these buyers are unrepresented and could miss something super detrimental in a contract. And so to have this buyer's broker, sorry to cut you off, but to have
Dude,
this buyer's
go.
broker's agreement gives us it facilitates the conversation of how important it is to have an agent represent you as a buyer.
Without a doubt.
That's what it does, full stop.
Yep.